And we are live. What is going on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube Live? It is your man, Coach Rowe. Today is Thursday. Now, I know that's going to sound a little funky to you to hear that it's Thursday, but it's Thursday, and I'd like to welcome you to a special edition of Intersations. Now, for those of you who were not around during the Intersation era, let me tell you a little bit about what an Intersation is. Intersation is when you take conversation and interview and you mix them together, you get intersation. So in my life, I'm a very, very fortunate man to have very deep and meaningful conversations that don't just stay at the surface level, but they actually dive deeper into much more organic and authentic conversation, actually much more, I would say, vulnerable conversation that I'm able to have with a variety of people in my network, out of my network, strangers, close acquaintances, doesn't matter. But I'm very blessed and fortunate to have that in my life. And what I found in those conversations is I was always finding that at the end of these conversations, I was growing and the other person was growing. And because of that, one of my friends, if you're a fan favorite, JC, said, you really should start having these conversations live because the people that don't get to hear them would absolutely benefit from them being in a live environment. So out of that, Intersation was born. However, I did discontinue that segment because it was a lot of content that I had to create in order to maintain that particular segment. But every once in a while, I meet somebody that I feel like the conversation needs to be brought into the public first row space. So with that being said, that's Intersations. I hope you guys are ready for a great Intersation tonight. Let me start by introducing my new but good friend, Maureen Lawton. Hello, Miss Lawton. How are you?
Hello, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Billy.
Yes, I'm happy to have you here. Tonight, the Intersations topic, we were trying to figure out what would be a good topic. And it was interesting that it landed for me in the organic conversation and how that organic conversation can lead to like deep connections with like strangers. I met you 2 months ago, maybe not even 2 months ago.
I know, right?
Month and a half ago.
Crazy.
But the connection, the moment that I met you, probably, I don't know if you've worked in sales in the aspect of like the warm lead, right? The person who introduced us, Tab Star, that person I have such an affinity for. Oh, I love that. I need to get emojis that I can put up. Tab Star. But the person who introduced you to me, I have such an affinity for her and a respect for her as a friend and just as an overall human being. And so when she's like, hey, you should connect with this person, and I'm bet, just tell me when and where. So that probably helped you on the warm lead to just have access immediately with very few reservations to be like, I don't know, do I want to connect with this person or not? Because Tab knows me and she knows, don't give me somebody that I would have to say, hey, look, you're talking to the wrong person the wrong way. Because I still am from Del Paso Heights, regardless of what I do online professionally, I am still from the Heights. So anyway, enough about that. I want to jump into tonight's topic. Again, the conversations topic. Sorry, I'm trying to get my banner up. The conversations topic is organic connection through conversations. And before we even jump into that, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to people. Tell people a little bit about yourself and why you're here this evening.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. My name is Maureen Lawton. I'm originally from Maryland, so I'm an East Coaster living a West Coast life now. Why is it that we have to say that when we say West Coast? Anyway, that's right. My energy. But definitely ran away from the cold and came here on passion and purpose. My husband is going into the animation industry, so a lot of the studios that he's coveting are here, which brings us to the west side of Los Angeles. My background is in leadership studies, specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion, creating psychological safety in the workplace. I'm very passionate about human connections, creating safe spaces, especially as a Black woman. I have noticed just in my being, in my journey, in my walk, usually I tend to be the only, quote unquote. And so with that has given me a very special experience in understanding what it's like to feel safe in a space, especially in the corporate world. So I'm very passionate about that. I'm passionate about emotional intelligence and things like that. So I am here for it. And that is a little bit about me.
All right. Well, I feel like there's so much based on our conversations that you didn't share, and I don't think you intentionally don't share it. But one of the things that we are going to come back to tonight is dream catchers.
Yes.
So when I was I don't know, 17 or 18, I can't remember. I'm getting old. But when I was 17 or 18. I actually was a part of this group called Dream Builders.
I love it.
And I was part of a lot of different groups, but this group specifically was a group that stood out because it kind of taught me a lot about business. It taught me a lot about vision. It taught me a lot about one of the gentlemen at the organization would always say, make it happen. Like, hey, I'm struggling in sales. Hey, make it happen. Hey, I'm struggling with this. Hey, make it happen. And I take a lot of that into what I do today. Like if there's something that I see there's a need, or there's something that I want, like if there's something I want to exist, I look at it this way. If there's something I want to exist, my responsibility is to build that dream, to make it happen and to manifest the dream. So I'm really looking forward to that part of the conversation. But before we get to that dream catching part of the conversation, I do want to ask you a little bit, not just about yourself, but kind of when I sent you this topic and you seen organic connection through conversation, how did that resonate with you? Why did it resonate with you? And what was like your overall thoughts about that particular title?
I really liked the organic part is what grabbed me the first, and then next connection, because I really think authentic connections are organic. Just like you talked about how we met, and it's just something that clicks between two people when you start to synergize and energize together. That's why masterminding is so powerful. It's just when people come together and that connecting happens. When you find your vibe and your tribe, it's just something that happens. And I love it when it happens organically, because I think sometimes when people are given parameters, though they may be good, keeps you in a box. But right. When it's organic, it's kind of like here in LA, like people that do stand up or people that do just impromptu kind of things. It's just like, wow, y'all are the real actors. They gave you one word. Great. Right. Came up with an opera, like right there, right? Like versus somebody that here's your script, here's your lines, this is what you say. Okay, that's a little safer, but organic just lets you stretch and just show up, and then the conversation leads to other things and other things. So I feel like there's freedom in that. So that's what really resonated with me.
Yeah, I like that stretch. It allows you to stretch, and part of that stretch, to me at least, is you're uninhibited in regards to what are they going to think about me if I say this about me? Are they going to now not be a part of, or not interact with me? Are they going to just kind of awkward and move away? But I've always said this about connecting with people. Look, you're going to get what you get with me. I'd rather you choose who I really am and rock with me, or choose to not rock with me because of who I really am, than to try to be somebody that I think people want me to be. Yeah. And then find out, man, well, they didn't even want me to be that person. So I still ended up without the people. So I look at the people who are involved in my life, and my wife and I have these conversations quite a bit. Because, when you're on air and you're you're an on-air personality, but my personality of who I am is very close to who I am in my every day-to-day life. I might cuss a little less online on the camera. But other than that, this is pretty much me. And so my wife and I will have conversations about that. And she's like, I know you're a compassionate person. I know these things. And I share a lot about our relationship and the good parts and the bad parts that we go through, because that's a real relationship. I don't know of any relationship that I've ever seen where it just seemed like, man, it is always amazing for them. Those have been some of the worst breakups I've ever seen in my life.
Wow. Right?
Ever. Hey, what's going on, Bobby? Glad to see you. So my cousin Bobby is in here.
Hey, Bobby.
On Tuesday, and now we hear her on Thursday. Appreciate you, cousin. But that organic stretch, that being able to stretch in a natural way to where it's not awkward, where you don't feel contorted and you don't feel like you're in that box trying to pull off the magic trick. Think about the contortionist who's the magician's assistant, and they're like, okay, we're going to saw them in half. And it's like, well, I'm going to cram my body in this little box, and then it's going to seem like magic. But the reality is it's like you have to get really uncomfortable, right? And you have to get really uncomfortable to pull off that magic trick. Well, why get uncomfortable to pull off something that's fake when you can be just as equally vulnerable and pull off something that's real?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like vulnerability is where the magic happens, when you start to open yourself up and allow yourself that, because it is allowing. It is an allowance that you yourself give yourself, right? To say, I feel safe enough and open enough to be able to share what this is. And the reason why I say that's where the magic happens is I think that's where human connection connects the most, because if things are too shiny all the time, they seem unattainable. It's just like you were saying, always perfect, almost always IG perfect, camera ready, as we say here in LA, hair and makeup. And the times where the magic has happened is when you're just being raw and real, and people can relate to that because they can see themselves in that. And as humans, we're flawed. So I think that's where it comes in, obviously within certain boundaries. I'm not saying, but for the most part, I think that's where it's, at least for me, that those are the people that I relate to more, when they seem like tangible, but when they're too like shiny and stuff, that's when like my imposter syndrome kicks in, or it's just like, oh my God, like what? So I think that's it as well. It's more approachable.
So question for you then, with moving from the East Coast to California, LA, a space like you said, got to be hair and makeup ready to go, right?
Yep.
How is it being in that environment where a lot of people put that IG ready facade out there because they're trying to either attract or they're either trying to attract or obtain some kind of connection to make their next step, like your husband trying to be an artist, right? An animator. Trying to be in that space, you do things that would attract attention in that space so that you can make the network and the connections so that you can then continue to pursue your dream, right? So what is it like for you being in that environment where for me, there was a very specific reason I chose not to move to Southern California. I had an opportunity to move down there. And in the midst of the move, I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not where I want to live. Because I've always been this person. Like, I'm live. I knew I was going live. I didn't shave. Why? Because I don't shave every day. And so if I have to like get ready for the show and all those different things and make sure my head's not too oily, I'm done. I'm going to stop doing the show. I'm not going to do those things. I'm going to stop doing the show. So for you, what is it like being in that environment where shiny is kind of, in some spaces, shiny is the norm? Not in all spaces, because I've been all throughout Southern California.
Sure. Yeah, it's all very true. In the beginning, it was very hard actually for me to kind of find like my space in my tribe because I left everything to come here. And when I say everything, I mean like my support system, my core girlfriends, my tribe, my community to be here. Our closest relatives are in San Diego, right?
Right.
So they're not even in like LA proper. So what I found is it's LA can be, I was told before I even moved here, can be a very lonely city because people are very spread out and people kind of stay in their own pockets. And then there's that shiny syndrome. So coming from the East Coast, one thing I noticed, especially as a person of color, as a Black woman that's very self-aware, that Black culture here in LA is different than where I came from in Maryland. Just in terms of just how people move in the culture is a little bit different. And so I had to recognize that as well. And also how that shows up in corporate. So like I was coming up and, like I was very self-aware and I wanted to, like my hair is usually in braids. It's usually like in purple hues and things like that. And I kind of bring like myself to work, like my unicorn self to work. I recognize that in LA, there was a certain expectations of what that looked like, especially for a Black woman, not only just a Black woman, but a Black curvy woman, because again, here in LA, it's very body conscious and things like that. Not all of it, but for the most part. And my first experiences that really quickly is my background is also in hospitality. And when I got here, I got a position as a VIP concierge because I've worked with artists and things like that at a very prestigious penthouse property. And being there, I was, again, I think I told you in the beginning, I find myself in these firsts. I was the first Black woman in that role ever. So they had a uniform that you have to wear, like in most hotels. And so when it was my turn, the woman, it was a custom tailor that came in and said, "We don't have your size." And I was like, okay, well,
That's interesting because custom is custom.
What do you want me to do about that? She's like, "We're going to have to custom make yours because we don't carry that size." Just the way she kept saying it. So I'm just like, okay, calm down, Maureen. Let's take this all in first, And I was like, well, I guess you're going to have to do that. And she's like, "Can you bring in like an example of like your dresses that will like, because we don't even have a pattern for it, like, so we can, make a pattern and all this stuff." So I was like, sure, happy to do that. And so she left and then I had to take a moment. It was one of those things where it's just like, don't let them see you sweat. And I was working with a colleague at that time, and I don't even think he knows how valuable he was to me. And that woman was a Black man. And a very big, large, Black, beautiful man. And he came to me and he was like, "What's going on?" And I told him. He was like, "No, first of all, they hired you, so they're going to have to make that work. So whatever they need to do, whatever fabric they need to order, whatever needs to happen, needs to happen. And so you have done nothing wrong. You are showing up, and shame on them for not having that size." And he was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment, especially coming from a Black man being affirmed like that. And I was like, thank you so much. His name is Nico. If you're listening, I love you, Nico. Because he just owned it. He was like, no, it doesn't matter how many times they have to do it. And so I went back and forth with this woman for like 2 weeks, and she kept making it a big deal until finally she did it. And then I had it, and my uniform looked different than everybody else's. But he was like, own it. They made that for you. Everybody else had to get the standard. Yours was customized,
Right.
So the way he just flipped it and turned that to a positive was really affirming for me. And I really appreciated that in that moment. And then after I left that property, they hired another Black woman that was from Georgia that was curvy like me. And she now had a uniform.
Nice. It makes being the first in a lot of spaces can suck. I'm just going to call it what it is. It can 100%. Suck, right?
Like if I hadn't gone through that, like literally in the back there and getting home and like fighting with my own insecurities and all things like that. And I was like in tears, right?
Right.
They didn't see that, but you know, after all that, after you take it all in, right? Because it's like, when does it stop? Like, when are we ever embraced? You know, and I was at that level. It was a 5-star luxury property, like premium, like where people stay at the Oscars, basically. And you don't know the name. If you don't know it, you won't know it because it doesn't look
Right.
like a hotel. And for that to happen in the way that God puts certain people in your life when you need it, right there, like Nico happened to be able to be working, because usually he worked overnight. He usually wasn't there, but he was there that day. And so I believe in, you know, I'm a spiritual person. I believe in angels in the mist when you need them, God sending you what you need when you need it. And he had somebody there for me and was like, I got you, right? Like, I'm here with you. You're not alone in this. And so the way that manifested, but being a first can be so difficult because you're the one that has to go through the fire, the challenges, walk on the coals, as they say. But it's so important to do that, because what happens after you, because of you, is the bigger prize, the bigger purpose. You know, it's because of you, but because of you, there is us. So looking back and being like, because I'm here, so can they come through. And so that is now when although that is a painful story for me, but the end result is what made all that worth it. Like me having to go through there and be measured and all that. And she's bringing out the tape measure, and it's just making me feel just totally like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening.
Right. No, you know, I think that happens in both being the first and in being the only sometimes.
Yeah.
That thought process happens. I remember when it was during the Black Lives Movement, when it was really like in full force. And I'm trying to remember, because there were so many young Black men who died. I'm trying to remember the moment that this took place in. There was Trayvon Martin. When Trayvon Martin passed away, I was working, and I remember being in such a space where I was just like, I'm not, you know, I'm a pretty buckled in with my sanity, right? I don't feel like I'm an extremist left or right either way. But I remember I was sitting at my desk and I was writing, and my boss came to me and he was like, you know, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm writing right now. And he's like, is it work related? And I'm like, no, it's not work related. I said, but if you want me to be here at work today, I need to finish writing what I'm writing. And what I was writing about was how I was feeling about being inundated with, because, you know, it's one thing to grow up in the neighborhood that you grew up in, and you know, not all cops are good cops, not all cops are bad cops. And you know, sometimes it's people in the neighborhood killing people in the neighborhood. Sometimes it's law enforcement killing people in the neighborhood. That's one thing. But it's another thing to be inundated nationally, night after night, of seeing people who look like you or people who look like your sons being murdered, and people who murdered them not being held accountable for it. And so I was just in this space where, I mean, I'm like, yo, do I need to start carrying my gun with me? Because
that's real.
It ain't going to be a shooting. It's going to be a shootout. I promise. Like, you're not just going to shoot me. So I'm writing all these emotions to kind of vent these emotions. And my boss is like, well, what are you writing about? I was like, I'm writing about how I'm tired of seeing people who look like me and my sons being murdered by law enforcement. Can you relate? He's like, I'm going to let you finish your writing. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's one of those moments where it's like, I don't have anybody in this space that I'm in that professional area to be like, hey, man, can I talk to you? Because I'm kind of going through. And you look like me. What's going on, Casual? Glad you can make it live, bro. I didn't have anybody in that space. And then when you fast forward to now Zimmerman and all, you go through all the other emotions that come with that, right? And then you get to George Floyd, and you're like, my God, we're still caught in this loop. And being one of the only in my department, it was at my department at the time, it was difficult to have like team conversations where they're trying to be, you know, DEI and inclusive and have these conversations. But the challenge of that conversation is now you're coming to me as if I'm the expert on all Black people, and I'm not. I'm the expert on me. That's it. And I understand my culture. I understand my people, but our people are very diverse and dynamically different.
Right.
So because of that, it got to the place where I had to go to my leadership and say, hey, I get that you guys are trying to be inclusive, and maybe you're even trying to make me feel comfortable that it's okay to talk about these topics, but it's exhausting for me to have to explain why a person who has their dog off the leash in Central Park is calling the cops on a black man who told her to put her dog on a leash. It's exhausting to have to explain that. And I don't have the energy to perform adequately at my job and educate the masses on that. Like, if you're a close friend, then we could have that conversation offline. But trying to educate a whole department of people who don't look like you and don't genuinely, they're not bad people. They just genuinely are ignorant of the circumstances. And I think sometimes we use that word ignorant as if it's a negative word. It's not. It's just a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding.
Yeah, it's an honest term.
Yeah, it's I'm ignorant of things as well.
Yeah.
So I love that, you're able to see beyond that and realize, just like for you, like, hey, I went through a difficult time, and because of that difficult time, somebody else is going to have a better moment or a better experience as they come in. And for me, it's like, I went through a difficult time, but because of that difficult time, and because I'm also a fight person, I'm not a flight person, I'm willing to speak up and say, hey, yo, you're putting too much on me, and my job is not to solve, the entire world's problem and create world peace and no hunger and all that stuff. That's not my job for the entirety of the world. So I love that. I do want to ask you a question that in our first conversation, we were talking about that you have kind of an educational approach. And I'm not sure if that's because of your background or because hospitality, but I really want to know why you chose to take an educational approach with inspiration, because you get ready to have to tell us about this dream Katcherz.
Yes. Well, part of it is my background. My background is in leadership studies. And but I'm also very service and heart-centered in how I move with everything. It's just how I've always been. But I grew up in a household where education was very important. I'm a daughter of an immigrant, so I come from that immigrant population. My father is East African, and if you know anything about African or Caribbean culture, education, you don't play. So, education was very important. And also I come from a family of educators. My mom was an educator, my niece is an educator, my grandmother's an educator. So with that being said, and learning at a very early age the value of education and how important that was in order to be able to move forward, I always carried that with me. And then even when I was in college, I really got into student affairs and student development and things like that, which is also about education. And so I felt, again, going back to my identity as a Black woman, where we didn't even have the opportunity to have education until very recently. That wasn't even something that was afforded to us. Like our eyes were gouged out or our tongues were cut because we had a book, because that's the value. And once I understood that and read that about Black history, I knew that the fact that I was an educated Black woman with a master's degree and then some was a privilege. And what do you do with privilege? It's not enough just to have it, but what do I do with it? Because that's the gift. That was the price that was paid so that I could have that, right? Not saying that that's the only way, but for me, that's how personal I took it. And I felt like I had to do something with that. I have to do something with that because of the shoulders that I stand on and what that means. And so I wanted it to be through education. And not only that, but to speak to the people that are not in necessarily my demographic as Black people, and talk to them because they tend to resonate with people because that are educated because they think we're not educated. So that's one thing you can never say, because I'm going to come with receipts and then some. So I'm going to meet you there. And just like when I am in those spaces that I have been in my life, even working on Capitol Hill, I worked on Capitol Hill for 3 years. I'm the person you're going to talk to, when they're like, well, is there a manager? Basically, like, is there someone else that doesn't look like you that I can talk to about this? No, it's me. I'm credentialed. I'm here for it.
As
How
a
can I
voice
help
said,
you today?
it's above me now. It's above me. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So
I was
how
the
can I
last
help
person
you?
here on
Yes.
earth.
Yeah. So it's me. I am the manager, actually. So how can I help you? You're forced to have to deal with me, right? And so I find that very empowering, not as a way to like boast or anything, but to teach them to see us in our light, that Black excellence in the many ways that it shows up is alive and well.
Right.
And we're not apes, we're not ignorant, we're not violent, we're not heathens, we're not any of those things. Some people make mistakes, yes, but it doesn't define us all. So you're not going to come at me with those labels today.
No,
is why I chose education.
Well, that makes sense on why you chose education, because then even in those moments, you're still educating, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes my middle son, I remember we went to open house, and he was maybe in 9th or 10th grade. We went to open house, and the teacher was like, "Do you have any questions?" And he was like, "How lit does your class get?" And he was like, because I don't like to really be bored. And he was like, "Well, I teach." Like the teacher was like, I don't know, how much do you like science? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Lit as much as you like science.
Yeah.
But in those moments, I think sometimes it's like being the child who says, "I'm bored," and then it's like, well, it's not the world's responsibility to figure out what you can do to entertain yourself. That's your responsibility.
Right.
Unless you're paying for a concert or an event
where
somebody is paid to entertain you.
Right.
And I think sometimes we think that education always has to be that way, and it's not. It's sometimes in the difficult conversations and the difficult interactions where people learn. Like, man, it's like that. When I was in high school, there was a guy. He was a nerdy guy, super nerdy, but he was a very good friend of mine, and he seemed like the type of guy you could pick on, right? He seemed like that.
Right.
But I knew, because I knew him personally, that he wasn't that guy.
Right.
And I remember this feels like a Saved by the Bell episode. I remember the star quarterback.
Yeah.
Picking on this dude. And I was like telling the star quarterback, like, hey, you might want to leave him alone because he's not all the way connected and he'll go off on you.
Yeah.
He ain't gonna do anything to me. And finally, one day we were in class, and I don't even know what the guy said to him or did to him, but I know that the guy that I told him was not all the way connected threw an overhead projector at him. And then when he tried to chase the guy threw like 2 or 3 desks at him. And I was like, I told you, leave him alone, because I know that he is capable of doing that.
Yes.
And it was unfortunately a confrontational moment for them, but it was an educational moment for him, that maybe sometimes when people tell you, like, stop poking the bear, you stop poking the bear. When they say stop going up to the buffalo in, Yellowstone Park, maybe you stop going up to the buffalo in Yellowstone Park.
Yeah. Yeah, for real. And I will say that, Billy, I just want to reiterate what you said about education. For a long time, I had a hard time speaking about my credentials. That was a weight on me. And it wasn't that I was ashamed that I was educated to that level, but what it came with on both sides. From some Black folk, like, oh, okay, you're educated, you there, that you want, you're one of them or whatever, Miss Masters or doctor or whatever you have, I wasn't included. Now I've kind of sold out for being that at that degree. Oh, you not everybody got a college degree, so some of that, and I'm just like, whoa, okay. And then so with that, I almost like would shrink, not mention it unless it was asked of me or you saw it in my credentials, I didn't lead with it.
Right.
Because until my cousin told me, like, what is wrong with you? Like, you should lead with that, so people know you worked hard, you went to school for that. Those are degrees. If you don't put, like, I didn't even have my degrees up, Billy.
Wow.
They were still in the, like when you get it in the folder, they're still there. Like, like it's my secret or something, and I'm like, whoa, like, where is that coming from? Like, I had to like really be like, what is that about? I think it was just like from some of those experiences, and because I always like, I walked different, I talked different, like in my community, it was always like, oh, well, you're not Black enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have street cred because I have degrees. I can't relate because, I don't talk a certain way or whatever, or you sound white or whatever. That kind of dialogue started to happen. And then the more I got, the more educated I got, the more I felt it even more.
Right.
From some circles of my own people. And so it started, like, I would shrink myself. I can say that now, I'm past that now, but I would shrink myself and not say that unless it was brought up. So I think that was also part of it. So even in getting that education, what does it really mean and how you show up, even in our communities, like the more educated you get, like, why is that a sellout? Like who taught us that? Like, why is that a bad thing?
Right.
Or because, well, my mom was a teacher, so was my grandmother. So there's just certain things like I don't speak, but then I can also code switch in a minute, depending on who I'm talking to.
Right.
Because that's a skill that we learned.
I can hand switch in a minute. Like,
I can code switch in a minute too. So it depends. Like, we'll hear, or we can have a different conversation. You can have a different experience as well. Because that's something I've had to learn to do to operate in these spaces, is code switch. It's just the way that it is, right? But I will say that the education gets me in the room, but my mind gets me to the microphone.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And education comes in different ways. I learn from people in all walks of life all the time. Right. Mm-hmm. But in the spaces that I needed to operate in to be of impact, I needed that credentialing to get me in the room. That was the ticket. But to stay in the room and to have a place at the table and speak at the mic, I had to show up with my mind and use that.
Right.
So I just wanted to just emphasize that, like, there's this double-edged sword sometimes, the higher you go in education, or the higher you go sometimes as Black people, and how we treat each other even.
Right. Which has always been strange to me. And I mean, like I said, the neighborhood I grew up in was a pretty tough neighborhood, but I've always spoken this way, and I probably accredit that to my early childhood development. I went to like a private daycare, private kindergarten, or not private kindergarten, but a really good kindergarten. And then I went to my neighborhood local school.
Right.
And so by the time I arrived in first grade, I already had a vernacular. Like, it was already developed because I had spent so much time in the first 5 years of my life developing it. Because I had working parents, so I had to go to school. I had to go to sitters to be watched. And so I've always found that to be interesting. But when I was younger, it was like the bullies on school would think, oh, look at this dude. He's talking square.
Right.
We going to take his lunch money, or we going to take his milk money, or his popcorn money. And then they find out, like, you're going to take these hands every time. Every time you're taking these hands. I don't know. But then what happens is it gets to the point where they're like, hey, don't mess with Roe, right? No. And it gets to the point where, and drugs were very, very, they saturated my neighborhood. Yeah. And so where I got people in elementary school smoking weed, and they're, hey, Roe, you want to hit this blunt? Hey, in junior high, you want to hit this blunt? Hey, in high school, you want to hit this blunt? And I'm like, it's not something I'm into. It's not something I want to do. So just like I took the stance on, you ain't going to take my milk money, I took the stance on who I wanted to be. And I don't care whether you smoke or not. That's a personal choice you get to make. Yeah. I have chosen I don't want to smoke, and it's not something I want to do. And so because of that, it got to the point where people would come up and be like, hey, Ro, do you want to smoke? And it'd be funny because some people who didn't know me would be like, I felt like they felt bad that they would be smoking around me. And so they're like, well, I got to offer him to smoke if I'm smoking around him. And I was like, no, I don't smoke. And it got to the point where people just knew, like, even if a new person was like, hey, do you want to smoke? They'd be like, no, Roe doesn't smoke. It just was like not a thing. But I think sometimes in our culture and with our people, we say, you square, you don't even smoke. You ain't never hit a blunt in your life. No, I haven't, because I haven't had any interest in it. And if I did have interest in it, I would have tried it, but I didn't. And if I did try it at this point, it would be because I'm allowing you to tell me that I need to be interested in it, and I'm not. Right. So the same thing when you talk about that education and it feels like you're selling, like you're made to feel. It doesn't feel like you're selling out. That's the funny thing. Like, being educated doesn't make me feel like I sold out.
No,
but
me neither.
You can be people can try to make you feel like you've sold out because you decided to do something to better overall yourself. And as I tell one of my godchildren is Iranian and Black, I tell him, like, your responsibility is not to fix the stereotype of what Black men or Iranian men are. That's not your responsibility. But your responsibility is to confuse the stereotype. That is your responsibility.
Disrupt.
I want people to see you and say, God dang it, that's not what I put my unconscious and or conscious bias on. I would have lost the house if I made a bet on that.
Yes.
And so I have learned in my experience where I didn't take the education, like the traditional education route to get to where I am. However, the role that I work at professionally is a very educated field.
Right.
But just when you said, I love that you said my credentials got me into the room, but my mind kept me in the room.
Yeah.
See, for me, it's always been my mind has got me in the room and kept me in the room because I don't have the credentials, right?
Right.
But even in interviews that I've had where I'm talking to like some of the most senior people in my field, some of the greatest, like brilliant minds that I've ever met, they're like, you don't have a college degree? Like, at all? You didn't take none of the classes? No, I didn't take any of the classes. But I've always been willing to learn. And I think sometimes we either do one of three things, but I'm only going to talk about two. We either think that we have to go to school in order to learn the information, or we get done with school and we cease learning. We cease to learn anything. And the reality is that we should be in this state of constantly being students and learning, if not about the world, then about ourselves. That you always have two places to learn: about yourself, about the world, about the world, about yourself. And so I'm learning in these moments when I ask you, why did you choose to take the educational approach on inspiration? I am learning that education and servitude, or being of service, those things go hand in hand. You as an educator are not going to be an effective educator, or at least not an effective educator for long, without being of service.
100%.
So I love that you bring that up. I do have another question, because you've been saying this a lot, and then I'm going to ask you to drop dream catchers.
Yes.
But you've been saying this a lot about the role models that you have in your life, right? You like, my grandmother was an education niece, my mom, all these people were educators in your world, or in your circle of influence. One of the parts of the conversations that I liked that we had earlier was about the lack of role models not even just in our culture, but just in our overall community.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about just like the Black community. I just mean the community of the world having a shortage of role models.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that? About, one, the impact you believe the lack of role models are having, but two, how you having those role models in your life really, I would say, kind of laid out a path or helped guide you in your own journey.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with role models, like for me, I would say I learned a lot, especially like from my dad. My dad worked for the Foreign Service, He worked for the United Nations for 25 years. So we kind of grew up traveling like a military brat. And that is where the seed of service that I first was introduced to, just traveling and growing up in the diplomatic community, really taught me culturally how to see the world and how to see people and experience that. And also the work that my dad did was very hands-on. So that was a huge influence for me. And then just being around I've always been inspired by dynamic people that were just dynamic, that look like me, and I was just like, amazing, I'm trying to get there, and sometimes your role models come from unexpected spaces. Like, I've been inspired by a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons, and it also isn't always their whole self. It's a piece of how they handled something that was inspiring to me and stayed with me, and I got a lesson from that. Not necessarily I take everything about them, right? But I took the way they handled this was really great role modeling for me. And I think once you approach it that way, is easier for me, because you know how they say never meet your superheroes because you'll be disappointed. And so it's just like, don't ruin the shiny. And then you do, and you're just like, dude, that was a good part, but there's this whole other side, the human part of it, right? So I just take kind of like, I model after like the way people do a certain thing that resonates with me, is how I do that as well. And so I think everyone is a role model, whether you choose to be or not. Somebody is watching you, you're influencing somebody in some way. So for me, I choose to own it. And again, having that very deep commitment to my culture and how I walk and how I show up in the world, and knowing that I can be an example, and then going back to like my community, breaking those unhealthy cycles in our communities that get passed down. The stuff is generational. Saying like, it stops with me, like some of that stops with me, and I'm going to have a different experience and choose a different experience to pass it on to someone else, so that is also important for me in role modeling. So it's not really so much about the person, but how they handled a certain situation was an example for me.
I like the I'm going to call it cherry picking. I like the cherry picking because there is a lot that you can learn in the world if you're willing to look at everybody. But if you're only willing to look at the shiny, right? If you're only willing to look at the celebrity or the athlete or whatever it may be, you're going to miss out on a lot of lessons.
And how quickly they fall. Just keep watching and just wait for it. The humanness will show up and you'll be like, there he is.
Right, exactly. I think that's interesting. I remember at one point I was going downtown in Sacramento, and I was visiting a friend who worked in a really high-end salon. And when I came out of the salon in downtown Sacramento, there's a homeless population. And so I came out of this high-end salon, and 2 doors down, there's this building that's not open, and there's 2 homeless people that are sitting on the porch or the little entryway of the building. And as I was walking past them, they were having this conversation, and the only part of this conversation that I caught was the lady tell the other homeless person, hey, I'm really your friend, right? Because I'm here as your friend and you don't have anything. There's literally nothing that I can get from you, and there's nothing that I can give you. So the fact that I'm choosing to be your friend is really because I value and want your friendship. And I was like, wow, dang. Like, how easy is it to look like, y'all homeless? I don't want to be like you. But to hear the humanity in, regardless of the material things that you have, this person is willing to be a part of your life and desires to be a part of your life. It was a lesson that I said, I want to have that same type of conviction with the people that I keep around me. I want them to be my friend, and I want to be their friend, not because of the things that they have or what they might be able to get me, but because the fact that I truly value that friendship and want to foster that friendship. So it doesn't surprise me that pretty much every year I go through this, I'm going to call it this, but it's whatever, it is what it is. I go through this culling of relationships and saying, hey, is this relationship still what I want it to be? Is it something I still want to invest in?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
if not, then if I'm truly the friend that I say I am, I need to make sure that that relationship comes to an end because it's ran its course or it's fulfilled its season. And a lot of people take that sometimes. They're like, dang, I had a person when I was living out here call me and I hadn't talked to them in 8 years. And this was a very close friend of mine for many, many years before we hadn't talked in 8 years. And they were like, oh, I'm thinking about taking a job out there. And I wanted to know if I can come and stay with you while I kind of like get my bearings and all these different things in Utah. And I was like, no, you can't. And they were like, well, you don't want to talk to your wife about it? Or no, because I don't want to do it. Why would I talk about it if I don't want to do it?
Right.
So that may have appeared to be cold, but on the other side of that, it was like, it was going on, Gates. On the other side of that, it was, I think where they thought they had the connection with me was from me being the person I was 8 years prior.
Yeah.
And so I ended up, I had a talk with a different friend who I do have a connection with. And I was like, hey, look, this is why I said no to that person. They were like, well, you should let them know that. And so I called them back and was like, hey, I know maybe it sounded cold for me to say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to offer you a place to stay. I said, but realize I haven't spoken to you in 8 years. You're a stranger to me.
Yeah.
I don't want you in my house because I don't know you.
Right. Right.
But a lot of us, and I think this is our cultural thing too, because we try to keep ourselves from feeling like, oh, you're too good for the hood now, right?
Right.
Or,
right.
And that's how we get into that, oh, you're speaking white or you're too good for us, and all that's that guilt that we put on ourselves.
Yeah.
Keep ourselves attached to places that we don't necessarily need to be
outgrown. Yeah.
I'm like, look, you're a stranger, and in order for me to or have a conversation with my wife about somebody coming from California to stay with me in Utah or stay with us in Utah, I don't want to do that. And I got to be able to vouch for you 100%. Because my wife is not going to be looking at me crazy. Like, why'd you let this person move in with us? And you know they weren't because they weren't like this 8 years ago. But I don't know what you're like today. And I'm not willing to put stress or strain in my household or my wife or our family because you want to rely on who Billy was 8 years ago. I tell people all the time, your cells turn over about every 7 years. Every 7 years, you are a new cellular creature from the point you were 7 years ago. So if that's the case, if I turned over 7 years, the person that you're talking to is a completely different entity.
Right.
Completely different entity. Right. So yeah, I'm sorry. 8 years, you missed it. And I give grace where I believe grace is due. Yeah. But at the same time, this year's word, I always have a word of the year, is intentionality. And it's not about how I intentionally show up in other people's lives. It's about how they show up in my life.
Yes.
Who's intentionally showing? B. Gate is a phenomenal friend of mine who literally will call and check on me. There's times where he'll go MIA. There's times where I'll go MIA, but he will call and check on me. And while he's MIA, I call and check on him. We're showing up in each other's life in a very equitable manner.
Right.
Whereas other people will show up for the good times and disappear during the bad times.
Yes. Yes.
I don't have no space for those people on my ship this time. Sorry. Gotta go.
And I think that's right. I'm a person that believes in seasons and moments. Like, I call it my yearly audit. My husband knows I do this at the beginning of the year. Every January, I go through my phone book. My phone, what we call phone book or your phone list or whatever you have on your cell phone or whatever. I was like, if I haven't talked to you in this much time or this many years, then I don't know what's up with you, then you don't need to be in my phone. And, I do that even on social media, like my Facebook. The people just collect Facebook friends and have like 1,000. Like, do you speak to these people? Like, who are these people? Or even when I'm real particular about Facebook connections. Like, I don't know you. Maybe we had 2 conversations or whatever, but does that make you my friend or have access to me? So I think as we grow, and that changes as it should, because as you grow, hopefully your character grows too, and you learn and you become wiser. And I hope, I continue to grow as a woman and be more decisive and intentional and make sure that the people in my life are in alignment with
Right.
how I'm walking, how I'm talking, what I'm learning is in alignment. And if it's not, then you're just not going to take up space. Like I know you're into real estate too. Like you just not going to pull up in somebody's property and not pay rent and just
Right.
chillax in there for years and then just go back, leave and come back and think you just no, like you can't. Like that's not how this works. So
Right.
there's a give and take that happens. And I think that's really important because when you grow, that's something that will happen in leadership. Not everybody comes with you in growth.
No.
We talked about stretch before. When you stretch, not everybody's coming with you on that journey. When you grow, when your cells turn over and all that, and that's okay because you've outgrown that. Thank them for that time and space, and now it's time to move on to some other things. And
Right.
I'm a person, like, I really synergize with people who are elevating. I energetically, like, I will always gravitate up, and that's where I want to be. And I'm always that way. So, the whole fly with eagles, I'm the eagle clan. Like Tammy and I say we're the eagle clan, eagles. I don't got time for buzzards. Like that was back then, like maybe in my 20s when I was trying to find something out, or in my 30s. But,
Right.
I'm like, if you're not trying to be about something or do something and we don't have alignment and there's no like give and take here, then, life is too short, basically. And that sounds harsh, but I think that's growth. That's wisdom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is respecting yourself, respecting your spirit, respecting your boundaries, your home, and all that.
Yeah. No, the time aspect, I think, is what a lot of us don't look at, because we all know we're on a countdown, not a count up, right?
Right.
We're counting up years, but the reality is it's a countdown.
Right. That part.
And when you realize that, you're like, yo, I'm just not gonna waste my time with that.
No.
Like at all.
Yeah.
I look at some of the people that I hung out with when I was younger.
Yeah.
And some of us are still Facebook friends. And if I see them on the street, hey, I'm happy to say
Yeah.
hello to you, but
Yeah.
we don't need to get together for what?
No.
Like, nah, I'm good. And
Yeah.
a lot of people, man, a lot of people know, hey, you're out there in Utah, man. And this is something that I think is very fascinating, is there's a lot of silent, when you talk about role models, right? There's a lot of silent admirers.
Yeah.
That are just watching.
Yeah.
And they're proud and they're enthusiastic about your wins, but they're just watching.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many silent admirers. I'm like, damn, you was watching the show. Like some of the people, like some of the hoodest people I know are like, yo, fam, I'm really seeing what you're doing and I'm proud of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And the things that you're bringing are things that are important for us to hear, and important for us to not only hear, but to hear from people who literally grew up in the same spaces that we grew up in.
100%.
So with that being said, let's talk about this dream catchers.
Okay.
No, just so y'all know, we going overtime today. So
I'm sorry.
We only get Intersations. This is the first Intersation in like a year and a half. We going overtime.
This is good.
But this dream catchers, tell the audience a little bit about dream catchers and what really provoked that thought of that concept for you.
Sure thing. So Dream Katcherz is my baby. That's my passion project. That's my heart. That is me at the core. Like we talked about, you can have all the education, you can have everything, but what God put on my heart was Dream Katcherz. It happened back in 2001 when I was laid off for the first time. I was working full-time doing that corporate grind. We had a staff meeting. My boss said the company's closing. We're in the red. The end. You'll get your last paycheck. So sorry, this is happening. Deuces. I had just signed a new lease for a new apartment, living my best life, making plans, and then that happened. And I was like, oh my God. What now, Miss Degrees and all that? What you gonna do now? Didn't see that coming, did you? You didn't work for accounting, didn't see the red happening. But we know that life happens, just when you think you get comfortable, you get disrupted. And so the idea came to me about what happens to people that with everything that you know and that you have, what else? Like, so I don't end up being in another person's, like, I don't want to give someone else that much power over me and my destiny and my purpose. Again, you know, it happens, and I'm not knocking anybody that's working or whatever, providing for your family, even if it's you. I don't knock that. But each of us has a special talent, gift, and purpose that has been given to us. Right. I don't care who it is. Somebody, all of us do. And so what happens when you bet on yourself? What happens when you sit with yourself and say, I know I'm meant for more. I know that this is me. Whatever it is that is, you know, you draw, you paint, you dance, you act, you crochet, you computers. I don't care what it is. You know, you're a chef, you're whatever, then that is your purpose. That is your gift. And you are too important for that not to happen, not to allow yourself that chance. You give everybody else a chance. I've worked since I was in high school. You've given corporations and companies that sucked a chance, and you showed up every day, put in your 40 hours, and you know they were raggedy, and you know that you had no business being there, but you have to survive. I understand that. You have to live, you have to provide. But what happens when you give yourself that kind of accommodation? And that's where Dream Katcherz was born, from me, from myself and my experiences that I've gone through. And 2001 seems like a really long time ago, but I kept coming back to it. I would leave it and come back. I'm not ready. Maybe next year I'm going to do it. Oh, I don't know. Let me work this job and I'll make this much and then I'll get the website. But I kept coming back. And that's what happens when I know that it was God-given. Because I kept coming back. I'd leave it and then he'll bring me right back and be like, remember? And people would be like, that Dream Katcherz thing, like, what's going on with that? Like, what are you doing with that? You know? And I was like, okay, it's needed. So it's an online community right now, but it will evolve. I'm hoping it will evolve as one of my tenants that I wanted to, that provides a safe space for dreamers, entrepreneurs, go-getters, disruptors, people who are out here and being like, you know, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm doing. And this is what it looks like. It's a supportive community. I highlight people that are getting their wins, big wins, small wins. I got the audition. I wrote the book. I cooked the thing. Whatever that is, I try to highlight it. People, I also have a heart for service. So I try to do this thing called Do Your Part Fridays, where I highlight people that are making differences in the world. Everyday heroes, whether it's like, this person, I make 50 sandwiches and give them to the homeless on Friday, or I know this person that has this ministry or whatever, or I'm doing this or whatever that is, because I think we have enough bad news. Where's the good news? Like, I know I don't even watch the news anymore because it's craziness, you know, and so I try to highlight that. Everyday heroes. So I try not to say nonprofits too much, because then people think of the big ones like Susan G. Komen, and that's all well and good. But I'm talking about everyday people that are like, this is how I can show up and change that a little bit, because I always have a heart for service as well. I think is important, you know, because again, it's not just about me. It's, you know, at the end of the day, and I'm a spiritual person, when my time comes, you know, I'm like, okay, God, I tried. This is what I did. I thank you for my life, and this is what I did with it. You know, that gap between born and dead, that middle gap, that this is what I tried to do to the best of my ability. And so that's what Dream Katcherz is. It's a place to highlight, uplift, and I am that too. You know, like, what is it like, Billy? You know, your book also, Following Your Passion. What is it like when you fire your job and go for your passion, when you bet on yourself and say, I'm going to do that thing, you know, and being in a community that's like, hey, sometimes we have hard days. I check in, like, how are we doing, dreamers? I know it's hard or whatever. Are we doing the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? It's a ramen night because we had to do this, or you work, you know, you're working 40 hours so you can still put in your dream and all that. Like, it's a very real special group of people that decide to bet on themselves. And that's what Dream Katcherz is.
Yeah, I love that. The everyday heroes. It reminds me a lot. It's funny how much I think about high school now as an adult, but it reminds me of high school where I went to. We have people who went to the league, right? Like professional basketball players, but professional football players, and I'm probably sure some other sports that I just don't pay attention to. And that was what was highlighted and really promoted about our school. Oh yeah, best football team in the division, right?
Right.
But then from my perspective, being like boots on the ground, I
Yeah.
also know we have doctors and we have nurses and we have
See,
lawyers and we have
see.
plumbers and we
Right.
have, we have writers, we have all kinds of other people
Yeah.
that came out of our school. We have
Yeah.
educators, we have all these other different wonderful people and minds that came out of our school. Yet sometimes we get so inundated by, man, that person. Remember one of the people I graduated with during their rookie contract, they made like $400,000 in their rookie contract. I was like, dang, that's bread. Like,
wow.
You weren't even a great student, but man, that's bread. I'm glad you,
Right.
happy for you that you got that. But it's like, if I were to put somebody going and playing a sport up against somebody who is a doctor and delivered a baby,
Yeah.
the doctor wins, not because of the money, but because of to me, the value of being able to bring human life into the world. Now, granted, you can bring a baby into the world without a doctor,
right,
but a doctor who helps bring that baby or that child into the world is just, to me, that's a different level of humanity. I actually had one person we went to school with who went to school to be a physician's assistant, which is like the highest, pretty much like the highest level of being a nurse, right?
Right.
And as a PA, they were like, you know what? I really wanted to be a doctor. And they went back through medical school again to become an internal medicine doctor.
Yeah.
And it's like, nobody highlights that story, but if you make it to the NFL or if you make it to the NBA, those stories are the stories that are highlighted. Right? It's like, and it causes me to think about, like, the LeBrons of the world. LeBron came out of high school straight into the league.
Right.
What else? Who else came out of LeBron school?
Right.
What else did they do?
Yeah.
Because he's a great basketball player. I'm not a fan, but he's a good basketball player.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's other people who came out of that school who were doing things.
Yeah.
That are probably, and this might sound harsh, but are probably more important than putting a ball into a cylinder.
Yeah.
Like and I like basketball.
Right.
But I'm just saying, at the end of the day, this is a game in which people, men or women, put a ball, a rubber object, into a hole and get points.
Right. Exactly.
So when you say the everyday hero, I love that, because I feel like those are the stories that resonate with people.
Yeah, they are.
Because they're closer. It'd be like me saying, oh, the store down the street versus the store in Scotland.
Exactly.
The store in Scotland I'm not going to.
Right.
So why are you telling me about it?
Yeah.
Whereas the store down the street, I can get in my car and go right now, or I can walk to it and still arrive at it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's why I like the everyday aspect of it, because I think it also, for me, puts a seed in people that you don't have to wait till you have the big thing to start. You can start where you are. You can do something big or small. You can start small. And so I try to do an everyday person that does this thing or is doing this thing that started, and maybe it grows into the larger, big, shiny thing. But you can start where you are. If you have a heart for service or something has been put on your heart to do, then do that, because it matters. You don't have to wait for the shiny thing. I think we were talking earlier about the shiny thing syndrome, that a lot of people gravitate to. And then it's like, okay, but it seems so far. Like I can't reach that. It's so far away, versus somebody that's like up close right here that's telling you. And that's also like with Dream Katcherz, why the members in the community are real people. And what I mean by real people is people I know, people I've come across, just like I featured you, Billy. It's people that are real, they're tangible, they are still working their job or have a family or doing this or that and still going after it and still finding ways to show up. And because you're seeing that, know that you too can. So for me, it's a two win. One, I'm highlighting someone that's doing it and affirming what they're doing, because I never know who's going to resonate with that person, who's going to resonate with that thing. If it's for them, then it will. And then two, on the flip side of that someone is seeing that and being like, I've always wanted to write a book. Wow, Billy did it. Like, he's real. I don't have to like IMDb his page only and like contact his person to get to him. Now, of course, there's probably somebody at Billy's door that's like, well, I don't know you, so let's see. But
it's Billy at Billy's door.
At someone's Billy's door, that's like the bouncer. That's like, nah. But at the same time, so it's purposeful. But one of the quotes that I saw that really resonated to me, and I don't know who said it, but someone said, I rent my title, but I own my character. So you rent your title, whatever it is, like we talked about, like you're the president, you're the CEO of this or that, or you have your education or whatever, this or that, but all that can go in a minute. You could get fired, your company could just shut down, it's happening all over, all that. But your character, who you are stays with you. You can even have the title and your character sucks. So it all boils down to me about your character and also purpose. I'm chasing purpose. And I think if you're on purpose, then the money will come for whatever that is or whatever you're worried about, because you're on purpose, and if you're, if you are a spiritual person, then you're in obedience to what has been given to you, the gift that has been given to you, and you're honoring that. And things will happen because it was given to you for a reason. Like someone else said that it's your dream for a reason. God gave you your dream for a reason. It wasn't a conference call.
Right.
It wasn't for everybody. It was for you. It wasn't a conference call. Not everyone's going to get it. Not everybody's going to be on it. Not everybody, because it's not for everybody.
Right.
It was for you, and you for a specific person. So once you stop looking at that whole, like everybody, like we talked about, that narrowing down the funnel, and being on purpose with that, it will come to be.
Yeah. And that it's interesting because in 2019, I had an idea for an investment club, and I probably had ideas for investment clubs far back as, I don't know, 2003. And I've had friends come to me, hey, if I just give you some money, will you invest it for me? No, right. I will not. If I just this, will you that? No, I will not. And so finally I was like, okay. I was actually having a conversation with B. Gate, and we were talking about our financial position. And it was like, we're kind of at this age where we should have a couple of racks on hand.
Right.
At any time. And so we started talking, and it was like, let's just start saving. Just start saving money. And this is a conversation between just he and I. Let's just start saving. And he was like, yo, I want to bring another friend of ours, Matt, in on it and have him save with us, and we didn't know what we were going to do. And then it became, you know what, let's write out this like we would a business plan.
Yeah.
And invite some people to join us in this, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do.
Right.
And long story short, that's 2019. We're almost 5 years in. In September will be our 5th year of saving. But not everybody joined. So that funnel effect that you were talking about, not everybody was like, yeah, I'm going to save. And then there was people who were like, yeah, I'm going to save. And then over time they didn't. And so we found out what they really meant by they were going to save. They weren't. And so all of that was to say, when it was nothing, right? When it was nothing.
Yeah.
The people who showed up and were committed, there ended up being 7 of us that showed up and were committed. And we have been committed going on almost 5 years now.
Amazing.
We've been committed. And it was interesting because we just knew we were saving. we knew we wanted to do things with the money. We wanted to invest, but it was like, okay, well, right now we're just saving. And last year we were able to get our first property together.
Wow.
And it's like, dang, like you said, it wasn't a conference call. Not everybody was there. Even if it was on their calendar,
right.
Not everybody showed up.
Yep.
And how people will, well, that's stupid. Why are you guys putting your money together? And you know what? Then the doubt of, well, what if somebody takes the money and all these different things? And it's like, look, it's business. We wrote it up as a business, and we're going to try to make sure we write the things to protect everybody in that business.
Yeah.
But then you get a piece of property and it becomes real for people. Not real for the people who've been saving for 4 years, but real for the people who were like, oh man, I wish I would have done that with you. I wish I would have been a part of that. I wish you guys would have told me. Yeah, you were told. You just forgot because it's been almost 5 years. But you were told that this was happening. And one of the things that all of my partners and I talk about is the equity, you know, sweat equity, but really the equity.
Yeah.
Not in the monetary sense, but in the sense of, we were saving money before COVID happened. Then COVID happened. And we were still saving money. Wow. And then COVID is like over. And now we're still saving money. And so to try to bring on a person now into that, it's like, you haven't shown us that level of commitment. Whenever we need to get something done, we can have a quick conversation or a quick meeting and we make decisions fast because there's a serious amount of trust that has been built over 4 years. But I think sometimes when it comes to whether it's dreams or passion, people feel like it's supposed to be instantaneous, like it's teleportation. Right. And it's not. It's small wins, small victories, small consistencies, and dedication that lead to that overall greater dream, that overall greater passion. And so for me, what I am learning, even in this space as a business owner, is learning that you don't get to shortcut the process. Period. You do not get to shortcut the process. You might want to shortcut the process, but you don't get to shortcut the process. Right. That's that three little pig syndrome where, I'm gonna just hurry up and throw up this straw, and then now you run into your brother's house of sticks, and now y'all run into your brother's house of bricks. And I'm not above supporting my brother if they make a mistake, or supporting my friend or family if they make a mistake. Sure. But if you continue to try to shortcut the process, at some point, I'm not going to allow you to reap the reward from me going through the entirety of the process. Yeah.
So true. So true.
So we are coming close to the end, but I did want to ask you this question because I think it's important, especially with the Dream Katcherz organization. The question that I have here is during COVID, and it's interesting because I wasn't thinking about this question when I was telling you that story, but during COVID, did you find your dreams getting placed on hold, or did you chase them even through COVID after the world shut down and the world was in this space of uncertainty?
Sure. Through COVID, actually, my dreams got even more granular. I dialed in even more because I felt it was necessary, and I was freed up the time to do so. There was no like, oh, I don't have time for that. I'm busy. Oh, I have work or whatever. It was kind of like, so what's the excuse now? We're all home now. You have internet. You have whatever you need. Ooh, what's happening? Basically to myself or whatever, me and God have these conversations sometimes. And I know he was like, about that. So what I did was I honed in on my skills. Because I was home, that's when I got my certification in emotional intelligence. I also got my certification in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. I honed in on my tool belt. These are all tools that I use as a leader, how I show up, also in not just Dream Katcherz, but also who Maureen is, the professional, the trainer, and all of that. I honed in my skills and I pull all that and was encouraging people even in the community with this time that you have. For the people that said you didn't have time, now you have the time. Let's get back to that book. Let's get back to that passion. Remember you said you always wanted to paint or whatever. You've always wanted whatnot. come up with that collection. Where are we at with that? So it was really helpful to get even more clear. I feel so many people during COVID left their professions,
Right.
and dialed into their passions, and now are working their passions. People who have been industries like, oh, I was in the healthcare industry for 30 years and now I sew.
Right.
Because during COVID, I got back to that. Like, I found that childhood, like, what would you want to be when you grow up? And if you were given that opportunity, what would you do? Not taking away from anybody that's in their professional life, because I get that too, because it's like a two street sometimes. But, what did we do with that? So that's what I did. And I was like, I edified myself so that I could show up stronger and gave myself that. And so, yeah, that's what I did. And it's helped. It's helped because even though there's like Maureen, the DI advocate, facilitator, and all that, it's still me. It's still all me, and I can still incorporate that in everything that I do in my business and my community. Like there's Billy, the author, there's Billy, the investor, there's Billy, the realtor, there's Billy, the all the things that you are. It's still you, but there's many facets to us, and that's okay, because even in entrepreneurship, it takes money to make money. So even in me saying like, oh, I want to do this for dream catchers and that, okay, but how much does that cost to do that? Where's that coming from? So, even if it's to fuel your business, so you can level your business and scale your business more, that's okay. Like I had to give myself permission that like, okay, I'm a hustle and grind here, but it's all going back to this. Like, this is the arrow. This is the North Star, is dream catchers. Everything else is leading back to that, And, God gives us multiple gifts and talents for a reason to use them.
Right. Not just one.
Not just one, and like if God put that purpose, like, okay, dream catchers on your heart. Okay, that's good, Maureen. And okay, so how else we gonna make it work? What else are you good at? Like time to lean on those degrees, and everything else that we went to school for. And what else can I do? And I'm very creative and I make things. I'm also an artisan and I make things with my hands. I do that. I do a lot of different things, but I think once you establish like what's your North Star, what's your core, what you're working towards, your, they call it like your why it's so important, your why. And then whatever it is that fuels that to go back to that purpose, that why, I think is okay. So that's what I did in COVID. I leveled up my tool belt.
I love the level up because I think of a couple of things. When the world shut down and everybody started working from home, right?
Sure.
I think that was a wonderful thing because it eliminated my commute. My commute at the time was like a 5-minute, 10-minute commute. It wasn't a very far commute. Right. But I think about if I was in California where my commute was 45 minutes to work, 35 minutes home. That's an hour and a half I get back of my time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But unfortunately, a lot of people took that hour and a half of time and instead of applying it to something that they love or wanted to do, they just applied it to sleep. Well, now I don't need to wake up that early. And that approach, that 45 minutes, even if it's just an hour a day, that hour that you could have really poured into your dream over the course of 365 days, right?
Yeah.
Is 365 hours that you could have poured into it because I'm a creature of habit. So I can't wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning during the work week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then on Saturday and Sunday, be like, now I'm going to wake up at 8. That's not my brain is programmed to wake up at the same time pretty much every day. I wake up probably about 2 minutes before my alarm goes off every day. And then when I don't have an alarm set, I wake up about 2 minutes before my alarm would be going off on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people gave that back. But the one thing that they did gain, even if they gave back the time, was the ability to get out of, I'm going to call it the monkey see, monkey do mentality. Oh, that battery died. But the monkey see, monkey do mentality in which you're in an environment in which everybody is doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so it feels very normal. Like if you're in a manufacturing plant, manufacturing bobby pins, everybody's sorting 10 bobby pins. That seems like a really normal thing to do, right? Because everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
But the reality is like, yo, I know God didn't put me here to sort bobby pins.
No.
I'm a great analyst. And it took me a while to say that. I had a lot of imposter syndrome for a long time about being an analyst. Like, do I really know what I'm doing? Or no, I'm a great analyst.
Yeah.
And I've gotten out of this through COVID and before COVID. I got out of this space where I was no longer willing to say with surety the things that I know to be true about myself. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that I'm a great analyst, I also know that that is not, data from the perspective of corporate America is not what I was placed on this planet for. Right. However, I utilize my analytical mind when I'm writing and when I'm creating content. I say, okay, how do I want to get this message across? Sure. How is it going to be as authentic as possible? How am I going to take what I learned in my reflection time and apply it and bring it to a much greater audience? That's also a part of my analytical mind.
Yes.
That is what my analytical mind was designed for, was to help people through stories and through inspiration see that they are not, number one, the only person in their situation, because we all got situations, but number two, that their situation can be improved based on a matter of small, consistent choices.
Absolutely. And habits, good habits. Like you said, like I work from home and I still have a schedule, like what time I like I would approach, like when I was in corporate working a full work day, whether that's 9 to 5 or whatever, that's what it's going to be for yourself. Because you do that for other people's dream. Why wouldn't you do that for yourself? Like I said, for people that might not even be deserving of that much of your input, you show up on time because you don't want to be late for work or whatever. So why don't you do that for yourself? And what would happen if you did do that for yourself? So I think that's great. And that discipline that you have, I think is great, and it's important. It's important.
It is. It's what has gotten me. I have a friend who tells me, they say, I'm an ideas person. They're an ideas person. They're like, but I have 100 ideas, but I don't do any of them. They're like, you are a task person. You will have the idea and then you will immediately create the tasks that you need to complete in order to create the idea. And I've always been that way. Always been that way, where it's like from building a little tree house in the tree when I was a kid to where I am today. It's like I see something and I say, okay, these are the steps that I think I can take to get to where I need to be. It's why I'm an efficient learner when I need to learn new technology. It's why I'm efficient at understanding new technologies and proprietary technologies. It's also why I'm efficient at understanding people. And allowing them to be who they are. And it sounds funny to allow somebody to be who they are, but you're not allowing them to be who they are. What you're doing is you're allowing you to accept who they are. And oftentimes we find ourselves, whether we're chasing dreams or chasing relationships, we find ourselves trying to change people from who they actually are. And my wife and I have conversations about this often, where it's like, hey, who you married is who you married. Like I am the person that you married, and there's things that I'm willing to evolve about myself for the betterment of our relationship. But there's some things, you said it very, very eloquently, there's some things that are me. So I have all these facets, but at the end of the day, all these facets make up me. They make up who I am, my identity. And so once I have decided that this is part of my identity, that is a core value that I'm not willing to change. You're going to have to either choose to either accept and align with that core value, or you're going to have to not. But I'm not going to have to choose to change the core value. That's not what's going to happen to my core.
Yeah, for sure. And something real quick that you said about efficiency that I want to touch on again, like you said that's why you're an efficient learner. That's also for me the same thing. I execute. I'm an executor of things and tasks, not people. So I do, and I'm one of those things where I see something, people said I'm an Aquarius, and someone said, "Oh, you're the operations manager of the zodiac." Like that's me. Like I will. Okay, what's the issue? Okay, here's what we're gonna do, and I'm a connector, and that's where it helps with my people skills, because I may not know it, but I will know someone that knows that. I will find someone that knows that, and I will make it happen. Like I am a resource, and that plays into dream catchers, because it's like, oh, okay, so you want to be a chef? Cool, cool, cool. Okay, I know, Sandra, she does this. Maybe I'll connect you. Maybe there's something there. Have you looked at this resource? I know this website, or I know this other thing. So I'm a connector, and that's a God-given talent that I have. Like I'm very resourceful. Part of it is just my own personal journey of survival. Like,
Right.
like I refuse to fail. So Maureen will find a way. People are like, girl, what are you selling now? What are you doing now? I'm that friend. Like, what?
Hey.
Because I refuse to fail. I was like, oh, no is not, no is a complete answer yet, but is it though? For me,
Right.
I'm like,
We can
let
figure
me find
something
a
out.
way. There's a way somehow. So it makes us very efficient as leaders. It makes us resourceful. It makes us, useful, in the way that we see something, and then we see through it. We don't get stuck. We see through it, around it, above it, below it. There's a way somewhere. Like no is like, what do you mean no? Like,
Right.
what?
No, it's very temporary.
Yes, it's like what? No, but I love that. I love that, and I just want to say real quick, Billy, for you, it's important to give people their flowers
Thank
when
you.
they're doing it, and what you're doing, and the many and all that makes you Billy. And I've said this to you before, especially as a person of color. As a Black woman, seeing a Black man and a person of leadership like you're doing, the way that you're showing up in the community, the way that you're sharing your talents, your knowledge, your expertise, even in your book and your workbook. My husband and I are both doing it. Is so important and so needed. And keeping you and keeping who you are unapologetically, because it's so necessary for people to see young Black men, and just people, even me as a woman, as a Black woman, to see that. And I just wanted to say thank you for creating this space, for doing what you do, and for being the blessing that you are, for the skills and talents that you have. It's so important for us to see that. It's so important for us to see that. So keep showing up. And I just wanted to say thank you and give you your flowers. I know there's so much more there, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say that to you, because sometimes as leaders, we just go, 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 and we forget until someone says something, and you're like, oh, that's right. That I did do that. I did impact that. Oh, okay. Thank you. And then you just, whatever. And we just keep going, 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 going. But to stop and be like, no, man, you're doing good work.
Thank
Good
you. I
job.
appreciate
Well
that.
done. You're doing good. So I just want to say job well done, Billy.
I appreciate it, and thank you. I'm
Uh-huh.
telling you, I'm about to steal that emoji. I'm about to have emoji popsicle sticks coming
I got
soon. The
this one
first row.
too. But I'm gonna need you to keep them down. But I got this one
That's
too. This
gonna
is
be
all about the heart.
so great. I might send that out to some of the men on the men's circle. That way, we don't even have to jump in. We just be like,
Yeah, you could just be like, "Bap, feeling
church.
that." There you go.
But no, you're right, because as leaders, we do just go. We just
We
go
go.
because it's funny. The first chapter of the book, there, you have a job to do, right?
Yeah.
And as a leader, you do have a job to do. There's things that you see that need to get done, and sometimes, unfortunately, as leaders, we're not effective delegators, and so the job has to get done, and we have to do the job. This is
Right.
why right now on the first row, I'm the cameraman. I control the graphics. I
See,
control the comment section. I control the
you doing it all.
dialogue. Like it just like. But here's the thing: if I had like an assistant, my assistant would have plugged up my light and it wouldn't have went off.
Yeah.
But it went off. It's life. It happens.
It happens.
But you're right. We do go, and we sometimes burn ourselves out because there is nothing that we take in to replenish us. And honestly, for me, appreciation, that's one of my love languages. Appreciation replenishes me. And imagine, writing a book, and you just wrote a book and then you didn't help anybody. versus writing a book and having somebody come back and say, hey, yo, you changed some paradigms in my life.
Yeah.
I don't need an Oscar. I don't need an award. Just
right.
The fact that I was able to help you change some paradigms in your life and see things differently, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good. Book was worth it. And here's the thing. I started off, Julie says she needs a set of those probably for your Teams meetings. I started off writing the book with the concept of I want to leave information behind for my sons. Yeah. That's how I started the concept off of the book. And then it was like, why wouldn't you want to help anybody else besides your sons?
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay,
so beautiful.
I need to expand where this audience is going. Yeah. Because if not, if I'd have just wrote it for my sons, I would have put it in a journal that they could have just picked up later on in life and like, here's my dad's memoir that he left for us to go over if we have questions, whatever it may be. But now it's in a place where not only can they get it, their children's children can get it, and their children's children's children can get it, and anybody else in the world can get it.
Yeah.
And that is where, we won't go into this tonight, but that is where when you start looking at legacy.
Yeah.
And one of the things you said earlier was like Black excellence, right?
Yeah.
To me, Black excellence is something that can be handed down.
Sure.
As confidently as we hand down trauma.
Yes.
Because we hand down trauma confidently.
Yes.
Confidently. What's going on, Tab? Julie, I got to bring this in because Julie says, everyone ignores the chat emoji. I love the visibility you're commanding. I'm telling you, as soon as I seen the heart one, I was like, oh, this is done. The little bubbles, they don't do it. But when you got a popsicle stick and a little, say less. We're going to get some. And maybe we'll do an online session and we'll make our own, Julie.
Yes, make them. I love them.
But so I appreciate you for taking a moment to give me flowers. And I feel like the space in which I would have been in probably 10 years ago, I'd be like, oh no, it's nothing, right? Don't worry about it. I am appreciative of flowers because I have learned to realize that appreciation is the fuel that keeps me going.
Yeah.
Because other than that, if I was just sitting here talking to a camera by myself for the rest of my life, I would like, okay, well, Billy, I'm done talking to you. It's been real. Bye.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So having an audience helps, even though half of my content is like a video journal to me. It's a video journal to me to be able to go back and say, man, what was I thinking in 2007? What was I thinking in 2010?
Yeah.
That's the video journal aspect of it. And it's actually, it started off as like a little mastermind between myself and myself.
Yeah.
Like I was just talking to my cell phone. And now here we are a decade later, and it's like I'm talking to actual people.
Amazing.
Around the world. I love it.
Hey, people around the world. I love it.
So with that, I'm going to bring us to a close. I want to give you an opportunity in this conversation of organic connection to give us what your closing thoughts would be. If you were to leave our audience with just a couple of takeaways, whether one or two takeaways, what would those takeaways be from our conversation tonight?
Yeah, I would definitely say now is the time. Whatever that thing is, whatever that project is, whatever you're waiting for that right time, there is no right time. There isn't. Even if you say, when I reach this number, I'll do this number. Life happens. Life happens. So now is the time, and it will come. I promise you, if you trust it, it will come. It will come. People will show up in your life. Resources will show up in your life just unexpectedly, and don't get locked into the number. That's what stopped me for a long time, waiting for that number. No, because when you ask for resources, it's not always locked into a number in terms of like hard money, right? It could
Right.
be like, oh, how am I going to make it or whatever. And someone's like, hey, man, I'm going out of town. I got all this food and it's going to go bad. Can you just come get it, or know anyone that needs it? Or whatever, like, can you take me to the airport? I'll, fill up your tank of gas or whatever. So you get what you need in that way. It's not
Right.
necessarily always the money that you're looking for, but it will be provided, whatever that thing is, in its own way. Someone will come up to you and give it to you, or an opportunity will happen that will serve that purpose, that will fill whatever that thing is that you wanted. Somebody will be like, someone will just say something, or you'll see it, it'll come up, and it will happen. So don't always get locked into the money of what it should be, but it will happen in different ways. So that's what I would say for today. So whatever that is, just start where you are and do it messy. Forget the shiny syndrome. Just start, and don't forget to reach out to people that, if you feel there's something that resonates and connects, just do that. Like, I just reached out to Billy, was like, yay. So you don't know me, but, we know somebody, but, and you resonate with people and trust the people that are put in your space, in your journey, and how things come together. So I would say just trust and just start.
I love
You're
it.
too important. You're too important. Your purpose is too important to not do it. The world needs you. Somebody needs you. We need to hear it. Somebody, something. It's too important for you not to do it. It's too important.
Yeah. So get started. When you get to the space in the book where it talks about being able to become pay grade with your passion, we gotta have another talk about that.
Yeah.
But I love that. Just start, because oftentimes what keeps us from starting is ourselves.
Yeah, 100%.
We will come up with 1,000 excuses. I don't have the resources. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy.
Well,
look, I stopped going to the gym from 2000. I hurt my shoulder, I think, in 2020, and I didn't start going back to the gym until 2023.
Yeah.
And it was just a space where it was like, I already know going back to the gym sucks. Like the first couple of weeks just sucks because the body's sore. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
But now here I am in April, going into May soon. And I've been working out consistently for 4 months, going on soon to be 5 months.
Wow.
And the energy that I have from that supersedes the pain that I had to go through in the initial startup.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where when you say that things will be provided, there was no, let me tell you this, before I was writing the book, there was no publisher provided.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Once I started writing the book, then a publisher was provided.
Wow. See?
You can't sit back not writing a book and expect a publishing company to come to you and be like, hey, you should thinking about writing a book.
Yeah. Right.
Once you start writing the book and the publishing company sees that you're serious, they're like, yo, would you like us to publish that book? That's a huge, huge difference.
Yeah.
So those are the things that for me, when you say just get started, get started. 1stWroe was rough when it started. It was rough when it started. I mean, I'd have my finger over the microphone for half the video. It was rough.
Yeah.
But to where it is today, though it's not
so
like
nice.
a super swanky production.
Yes.
Trust me, it's way better than it was. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. Typically at the end, I'm going to do it today. But at the end of Intersation, I like to give the tools certain things that kind of caught my ear, caught my eye, or caught my mind in the conversation. And so tonight I pulled 3 things out of our conversation. Okay. And the first thing was kind of in the first part of our conversation. It was the first tool. I always talk about tools for the 1st row. It was don't allow guilt to cause you to shrink. And
Yeah.
you were telling your story about that shrinking and feeling like you're getting too far away from your roots and too far ahead of your culture or our people, to where it was like, I don't even want to mention the good that I do.
Yeah.
I tell everybody that I wrote a book. Everybody. I ain't gonna lie, when I first wrote the book, I was like, dang, okay, I got to tell everybody because I got to get the book out there. But then it was like, I really don't want to talk about the book. But now it's like, yeah, no, I wrote a book, and here's what it's about. I wear shirts that say "Fire your job, hire your passion" on them.
Love it.
All the time. I was in Costco the other day, and this guy was like, "Fire your job, hire your passion. What's that about?" Oh, it's my book. Like, I do that all the time because I'm not willing to shrink anymore.
Love that.
I'm going to be as huge as I'm supposed to be. I'm going to take up as much space as I'm supposed to take up. So I love that don't allow your guilt to cause you to shrink, because I feel like it is a guilt. We feel like we get ahead, and because we are ahead, we have to stay humble. And there is a sense of humility that I think people should have. And there's a sense of humility that I do have. Yeah. However, when you're excellent at something, if you know how to help somebody do something, then be excellent at that. And it's okay to be excellent at that.
Yeah.
So that was tool number 1 that I took away. Tool number 2, and you said this kind of directly and indirectly, is comfort leads to disruption. And I was thinking about how, when we're comfortable in the space, I want to say complacent, though it's about comfort. When we're in a space when we're in complacency, the moment we're demanded to grow, we're disrupted. Now, the thing is are we disrupted enough to actually take action? Are we disrupted enough to say, okay, enough's enough. I'm not going to put this on the back burner anymore. I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But that comfort that we have, where we're comfortable sitting back and being on the couch and relaxing, and it's Thursday night. Tomorrow is Friday. I worked a 10-hour day before our Intersation. It would be easy to just be comfortable and sit and watch Netflix and finish the 3-body problem.
Right.
Episodes that I have.
Well, I'm watching that too, but that's a sidebar.
Right. So it'll be easy to do that. Yes. And that would be comfortable. But by choosing the discomfort, by choosing to not be complacent and disrupting that comfort with this conversation, there's a level of growth that takes place. And 3-body problem, though, it'll give me, the way my mind works, it'll give me a bunch of things to think about from like a humanity perspective and alien.
Yes.
Like, it gives me 1,000 things to think about.
So much. Yeah.
But this is much more specifically honed into what my purpose is here on the planet.
Yeah.
So comfort leads to disruption, and be willing to get uncomfortable so that your disruption doesn't have to be catastrophic. That's what I would also add to that.
Yeah.
And then tool number 3 that I pulled was use the downtime to develop. And that was from that perspective of when you said when you were dealing with COVID, right?
Yep.
I honed my skills. I perfected my craft. Hey, I had to figure out how to become a 5-star or 3-star Michelin restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Because no restaurants were open. So I honed my craft.
Yeah.
I got great quality ingredients.
Yeah.
And I cooked them to the best of my profession that I could. But eventually, over time, that practice, that repetition, it doesn't make us perfect. It simply makes us better.
Yeah.
And so using that downtime to develop, I think often what we do is we burn ourselves out, and then we take downtime and we just use that downtime to recover. If you figure out how to quit burning yourself out, you can actually use your downtime to develop yourself, and it won't be as overwhelming. Because for me, this conversation is a developmental conversation for me, right?
Yeah.
But it's not overwhelming, even though I worked a 10-hour workday before it.
Yeah.
And so use your downtime to develop and try to keep yourself out of a space of burnout so that you're not simply just exhausted in downtime, resting all the time. But those are the 3 things that I pulled from the conversation.
Amazing.
Man, it's been so wonderful speaking with you this evening.
You too.
I told you, you just gonna have an organic conversation,
I love it.
Chill and have a good time.
Jewels and gems, man. I feel so ignited. I love it.
So, other than that, for you guys who are still with us live, thank you for kicking it with us for the overtime. Normally Intersations are an hour, but hey, if they're every once in a couple of wild blue moons, then over an hour, we love it. Bang, heart emoji. But other than that, that's all I got. The next time that I'll be live on the first row is not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday following will be another section or session of the men's circle. We'll find out what the topic is because I don't have my show schedule in front of me right now. But that'll be the next time that you'll catch us live on the first row. But other than that, if you have liked this video, this Intersation, then I would ask that you like it, right? And if you like it, then I'm going to ask that you share it because those things are important. Getting messages out, getting stories out are important. And it goes back to, like you said earlier, the everyday hero, right?
Yeah.
Getting those everyday hero stories out are life-changing to the world.
Absolutely.
So if you like this video, share it. If you share it, like it. We're always loving engaging with you guys in the live chat. And if you would like to engage in the comments and you're watching via the replay, happy to engage with you for the first 7 days that the content is up. After that, I move on with my life. But until the next time, definitely appreciate you being here, Maureen. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and your gems. But until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thank you for sitting on the first row.
Thank you.